From postal workers to nurses, he's been endorsed for real change. Bernie Sanders, endorsed by Friends of the Earth Action as a bold, fearless voice for the planet. The nation endorses Bernie, saying, "You can trust Sanders because he doesn't owe his political career to the financial overlords." The Nashua Telegraph declares he's not beholden to Wall Street money. The Valley News says Sanders has been genuinely outraged about the treatment of ordinary Americans for as long as we can remember.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
Hi everyone, I'm Angela Valdez with Bernie 2016 TV, and we have a We the People special with Terence Strait. He is a Congress candidate for Maryland, District 4. So we wanted to welcome Terence today, and let's get him on camera here. Welcome, Terence.
Thanks for having me.
We're excited to talk to you because you also happen to be a young candidate. You're a millennial. And so we'll be talking about differences in age gap and how that affects people's policy issues in a lot of ways, and how there's many Bernie supporters out there that can actually align under Bernie's policies and policies that you also endorse in your candidacy. So we also have John Ellis with us producing today, and it looks like we have a few other people who might jump in and help with comment moderating later. If we have some time, we'll bring up some questions from the viewers and see if there's anything that they would like to address with Terence at that time. So what we'll do is we'll dive in and find out a little bit more about Terence. So Terence, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? We'll show slide 2, John, as we go through that. And Terence, you feel free to tell us your background, because your background is unique and different, and I think it really speaks to the diversity that we really need in our government.
I have lived all around the country. I was born in Michigan. I grew up in Indiana. After I graduated high school, I joined the Army, so I, of course, moved around a lot there. I went to college in Alabama, and yes, I know. Got my degree in psychology, first my undergraduate degree, and with a math minor, and then my master's degree. And then I was unemployed for a year while I looked for work. And towards the end of that year, I got a phone call from the Census Bureau asking if I was still interested in a job, because I had, put out applications to a lot of different places. So that's how I ended up in Maryland. And then I worked as a statistician for the Census Bureau for just under 3 years when I decided to run for office. And of course, because of the Hatch Act, federal employees aren't allowed to run for office. So I had to leave my job there in order to run. So I kind of, it was a little bit of a jump off a cliff, jump and see if you can fly, because there are not a lot of 34-year-olds that can put aside enough money to last them and pay bills through, a year and a half, because that money has to last me through January, assuming I win.
This is a different situation that a lot of viewers and voters are not used to seeing, because we don't see a lot of people stand up and say, I'm going to run, and I'm not going to do it with special interest money. I'm not going to do it because I have a rich parent or a rich family that can float me this time to get in the spotlight. So what led you to be in the spotlight, to decide to leave the Census Bureau and to go into public service specifically? What were some of the issues that you were really, because you mentioned, not having a job, looking for a job, and being quite educated. How did that affect your decision to run for office? What were the issues that you wanted to change?
Well, let me lead by saying I am not a fan of the spotlight. Like, if I thought that the other people could address the issues that need addressing, I would not be running today. I would still be in my nice, secure government job. But I noticed that we have a government that is just completely wrapped up in the concept of crisis-to-crisis governance, and nobody looking past the next election. And even people who are willing to look a little bit further down the road aren't doing real long-term planning. For example, one of my big issues is the environment. And what qualifies as an ambitious environmental plan right now is slowing down the rate of warming. Not stopping it, not reversing it, just slowing it down. So maybe things aren't going to be quite as bad for our kids, but our grandkids are still going to be in trouble. And that's just not acceptable to me. And what really kind of pushed me over the edge and made me go, I need to get involved. I don't know if you remember the December 2014 budget deal. It was a really bad agreement I mean, it was what needed to be done to get it past the Republicans. But when Democrats came out and didn't say, you know, this is the best we could get, you know, it's what we had to do to keep the government open, they came out and sold it as being a good deal. And that's when I knew that just showing up and voting wasn't good enough anymore. We needed a voice in Congress who would actually stand up and tell the truth.
Exactly. Well, and you have, your master's in psychology. You were in the Army, and you also have worked in, out in real estate and the retail industry. So you have a wide variety of skill sets and experiences. And that's one thing that, a lot of candidates or people in Congress now that we have, you look at the career politicians, and a lot of them seem to have jobs that had really high salaries and were very easy to transition into more money. Whereas, if you don't have that, where's the representation for you in public office? Where are those people? So, so you're running for Congress in Maryland. And I wanted to show slide 3 and slide 4 in a few seconds, if you'd like, John. And we'll just let Terence tell us also just what's it been like in Maryland, the general view of Bernie Sanders and of your progressive views, because I know nationally he's obviously very well loved. There's a bunch of us volunteering our time to get his name out and his message out. So what's it like over there in Maryland for you?
Bernie isn't really well known here in Maryland, at least not among the people that I've talked to, but the people who do know him really like him. So, for example, the picture that is showing up now is the Anne Arundel Democratic Party, and that was at the Anne Arundel County Fair. And there was material up there for a lot of different candidates, and none of the presidential candidates, weirdly. So the first day I went up, there wasn't any material for Bernie or Hillary or Martin O'Malley, very strangely to me. But a lot of people stopped by asking for it. So I had previously hosted a Bernie Sanders event. I think it was a debate viewing party. And they had sent me a bunch of materials. So the second day that I was working at the county fair, I brought them up with me, and they were gone super quick. So yeah, among the people who know who he is, he's really well liked.
So it sounds like in Maryland we have some groundwork to do, right? And so today's show will definitely focus on that, because the platform you're running on is very similar to what Bernie's policies are, and you get a chance to kind of explain a little bit more about that too as we go. So what I'd like to do is show a little video. It's called Vote Together. We're going to be showing a few of the great campaign advertisements that have come from the Bernie campaign through this show, because it really speaks to Maryland voters and also nationally what Bernie's policies are going to do for all of us, and how he's going to work with us. And this election is about us and not him. So when you're ready with that, John.
Our job is not to divide. Our job is to bring people together. If we do not allow them to divide us up by race, by sexual orientation, by gender, by not allowing them to divide us up by whether or not we were born in America or whether we're immigrants, when we stand together as white, black, and Hispanic, gay and straight, and woman and man, when we stand together and demand that this country works for all of us rather than the few, we will transform America. And that is what this campaign is about. It's bringing people together.
So in that little clip, we kind of got a chance to see just the wide variety of supporters that Bernie Sanders has, and the progressive policies have, because I think there's a really big underlying current that's been going on for years that we're going to talk about now, that has to do with the age gap that we're kind of seeing in polls and in a lot of voting results. And what it is that there's some idealistic, what they call idealistic policies that we have come to be raised with. It's in our storybooks. We were talking about it yesterday. Things like He-Man and Thundercats and Transformers. Millennials grew up watching characters that were all different colors, all different shapes and sizes. We were told everyone was equal. We saw them fight side by side. We saw them do everything they could to help each other. And, now that we're grown-ups, that message really did carry hardcore, I know, in me, and it seems like a lot of millennials as well. So now that we're adults and we're wondering why our government isn't working in that way, we have this opportunity to change course. And one of those ways, if you want to show this slide, slide 5, John, it shows that we have a total number of 469 seats that are going to be up and for election in November. And what that means is we have 469 chances to elect people who represent us. I mean, what a great opportunity. And I think we've all gotten so used to being beat down by the money factor, which we'll talk about later today, that we've lost sight of the fact that we're not being represented anymore because we've kind of given up. So, Terence, thank you for taking the opportunity not only to take time out of your life to run and to put yourself into this position to represent more people in a government position. And so what I'd like to do now is we're going to talk a little bit about this age gap. So if you'd like to go to slide 6, there's a couple of issues and agendas that are Bernie's that poll very well with people. One of them is raising taxes on the wealthy. Another one is raising taxes on big corporations. Single-payer health care has been one that has been very important to many people because most of the people who want single-payer health care, they're in a situation where they're being stuck paying a lot of money right now and falling between the cracks of the Affordable Care Act that we really want to close those gaps on. So the fact that people want that is a reason that Bernie speaks so loudly about it, and he was saying it for years. So the other one is free college, and I wanted you to talk about that because you are a millennial, you went to college. Do you still have student loans? And so you probably, or maybe you've paid them off, but have you had, I mean, I'm hoping, right? But maybe, like from a millennial standpoint who has graduated college or in the workforce, as a candidate running, what kind of experience and message do you think you could give to not only millennials, but people older? Because, our grandparents, our parents, our aunts and uncles, they need to hear what this experience has been like for people in our age group. So would you like to share how that felt for you?
And yes, I still have student loans. I've got about $60,000 worth of them. Fortunately, I mean, if I get elected, those student loans will go away real quick because members of Congress are just paid absurdly well. I don't know how they complain that they don't make enough money. Their pay is ridiculous. But one thing that I've noticed, because I like to compare Bernie Sanders' college plan with Hillary Clinton's college plan. And I've heard a lot of people say that, with Bernie Sanders' plan, that the students should have some skin in the game, that they should have to pay tuition because otherwise they're just going to take it for granted. And that ignores the fact that there are so many other costs that a lot of students have to pay. Like, not all students go to an in-state school and live with their parents. I mean, that's a relatively rare situation.
I think that Hillary's personal experience as a Caucasian white woman growing up in the type of environment she did with the opportunity she had, the education she had in that age, in that generational time when they were allowed to be able to get into college. She's maybe not seeing what it's like for people our age, is she? I mean, and that's why she doesn't see what it's like for future generations either. And so, to her, she thinks you've got to pull up your bootstraps and work it off. But to most of us, I know I worked 2 jobs almost the entire time through college. I was a lifeguard. I worked at an elderly group home and did 24-hour shifts helping people, taking care of them. And I worked a very hard life and tried to go to school because I felt that I deserved it. And it would have been really helpful for me to focus my efforts a lot more in the direction my education was going rather than spending a lot of time doing things that were frankly very exhausting for me, and I had to train to learn and was not paid a very fair wage. So what was it like for you in college? Did you have to take jobs and things like that as well?
See, I was actually fortunate as far as that goes, because I was in the Army, and I people come out of the Army with various things wrong with them. It's just a side effect of being in. So I had a disability benefit that helped me pay for some of my bills. And I had a vocational rehab benefit that helped pay for my undergraduate tuition and my books. So really, the bills that I was stuck paying are the ones that aren't included in Hillary's plan, like housing and food. I didn't have to pay for health insurance, fortunately, because I got my health care through the VA. But these are things that are just completely left out of that plan. And the fact that she still has the family contribution. Like, she talks about debt-free college, but there's the family contribution. Not everybody's family helps them pay for school. That's why I joined the Army in the first place. I mean, my parents both made a lot of money. They were both in six figures. And my dad came up to me one day and he's like, you know, we're not helping you pay for school, right? And I knew that I wasn't going to get any need-based aid. That was just not happening because I knew how much money they made. So I was very lucky when the recruiters came to my high school the next week. And so that's how I ended up in the military. But I mean, I'm not alone there. I'm not the only person whose parents would be financially able to help them, but unwilling to help them.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what was their reasoning for not helping, because that's a different side that, you know, Hillary is saying that basically, you know, you can do a little work, but, you know, the family helps. So, I mean, what would be that counter argument right there? I mean, it's pretty powerful. Like, you can't deny it. So,
I mean, parents can help, and a lot of them do. Like, there are a lot of parents that chip in and help their kids go to school. But that shouldn't be something that's a requirement. Like, there are a lot of people who had much, you know, worse family situations than I did. Like, people who get kicked out of their homes because they come out as gay or they come out as atheist, and they're out there homeless. So if they want to go to college and then they have to try and go back to their parents to get money for school, that's just not going to happen. You know, you've got parents who are emotionally, physically abusive. My parents weren't physically abusive, but there are so many kids who are in that situation, and to demand that they go back to their parents and ask them to help pay for school, otherwise they have to take on this huge load of debt. Like, I had all those veterans benefits, and I still have $60,000 in debt. Granted, a lot of that was accumulated through grad school because the VA does not pay for grad school. So that's where a lot of that came from. But a lot of people also don't have that benefit to fall back on.
Yeah. You know, one thing that I would love to personally say to Hillary Clinton and those who would fight against the chance to have a free education, like we're talking about, is why is it that education and knowledge isn't a right? Why isn't it a right? Why don't we consider it a right for every person in our country to be smart, to have the opportunity to have the knowledge required to be able to be a very positive contributing factor in society? I find it so interesting that the news media doesn't ever mention that and question that. Like, you know, it's the same reason that we were all shocked. A lot of millennials were shocked when they're like questioning single-payer health care. Health care is a right. Why have we been questioning this? It should be undeniable. When we talk about the Constitution and our rights that are guaranteed to us, doesn't that include that? I mean, you know,
well, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You would think that life includes healthcare. That seems kind of obvious to me. But as far as your point on education being a right, I think it goes beyond even just having a smart population. In terms of getting a job, a bachelor's degree now is what a high school degree used to be. My dad, he worked retail and he went up through the ranks, and he got to be a store manager and then a district manager. But, you know, he admitted that if he had come into the job later, if he had come up when I was entering the workforce, that wouldn't have been possible, because you would need to have a business degree in order to have the positions that he was holding with no college at all.
Yeah. With us talking about this topic, John, would you like to show slide 7, please? It shows the voters, the gap in who chooses Bernie over Hillary, and it's quite fascinating because 84% people prefer Bernie over Hillary when they're between the ages of 17 and 29. So when you're telling about, you know, just that example right there, that age gap is not only an age gap in who we support, but it's in what we value, I really think. And it's surprising because what we're saying to our grandparents and our parents and our uncles and and aunts out there is, you taught us to see each other as equal. You taught us to value ourselves. You taught us to value each other. You taught us to stand up for each other. That's what we're doing. That's what Bernie's been doing. And he's done it for like 40, 50 years. And he's not stopping. In fact, he is grabbing more people into the fold and saying, you're being slighted? That's not happening anymore. And he goes down to the Congress floor and he yells about it. And he demands change and he writes laws. It's the reason he's being called the Amendment King, you know? So maybe that'll be a title you'll have to fight him for. You know, maybe that's what progressives all should be doing, is aspiring to be, you know, someone like Bernie Sanders in Congress, really fighting to make changes for everyone involved, not just people who have the money to show for it. Because when I talk about education, and I'm saying that it's a right, I'm saying it's a right because if we don't work our brains, our bodies start to die. And so the brain actually stops creating neural pathways if you don't keep learning. People struggle and start to develop dementia and Alzheimer's because if they don't learn more and continue to grow as a human being, then they won't be able to continue to live, you know, with the pursuit of happiness. So let's go to this next slide here, because that was kind of a little bit more showing all the age gaps. It's slide 8, and this is actually for New Hampshire, but in Iowa it was quite similar, where the age gap of Sanders to Clinton was like 76% to maybe like 20% or something. But
it shifted faster.
It did. So it's been, I mean, it's quite pronounced, you know, because you look at the 65 and older group, and they seem kind of torn in New Hampshire. So maybe in Maryland it could be a reflection of the same thing, you know, and that may be that maybe there's a lot of our grandparents and parents, and the reason I say that is because this is a particular generation that we're seeing a direct reflection of who they support and what the policies are that she supports. And that's the reason we want to talk about it today so much. So let's go into slide, let's see, we're on slide 8. So slide 9, if you would like to go there. I wanted to hear your take, Terence, on democratic socialism. So in slide 9, we've got some pictures of a few people who have done some amazing things in our country and have inspired us. And hopefully maybe your picture and others will end up there someday too. So I was wondering if you could tell us what, you know, from your experience when you look at leaders in our country, maybe pick one that you have found to be inspiring that you would hope would, you know, be something that you could have some courage to do the same thing, you know, walk the same line. Who would be someone you would aspire to?
With the exception of the internment camps, of course, I'm going to say FDR. I mean, he did so much for this country after we were just thrown into this tremendous depression, and he helped people who were, you know, in crushing poverty to you know, keep surviving. So I recently got I got a questionnaire today from the Baltimore Sun, a candidate questionnaire, and one of the questions was what I thought President Obama's legacy was, and you know, some of the things that he had done well and done badly. And I used a medical analogy to at the very end of like what I think he had done well and done poorly. And you know, President Obama came in and the country was in critical condition, and he brought us to stable, which is a tremendous act. I mean, that you cannot overstate the benefit of stabilizing the country from where we were when he came in. But stable isn't healthy. I mean, it's important to go from critical to stable, but we can't say stable is good enough. Mm-hmm. We have to move to a healthy society where people are able to live, not just, you know, scraping by, not where we have people who are working 40 hours a week and homeless. I mean, that's not right.
Yeah, and you know, the people of our country would definitely benefit from our government being more proactive rather than constantly dealing with crisis management. And I think that's part of where the oversight's so important, having, you know, a full Congress, a very aware candidate or aware congressman that understand, women that understand the needs of the country and jump to meet those needs. So we have a video I wanted to show. This is of Bernie, and he just says a little something that when you and I were talking, Terence, yesterday, it just kind of spoke to the energy and the spirit of you in this campaign. So this is Bernie and why he gives a damn.
So I think it's fair to say that my political career is different than anybody else's. Because I didn't get into politics to figure out how I could become president or a senator. I got into politics because I give a damn, all right? Because I do think it is an outrage that we have people sleeping out on the streets in this country, that 51% of young African-American kids are unemployed or underemployed, that millions of people don't have any health insurance. That's what I feel in my gut, and that's what I'm fighting to change. Is that a good answer?
That is a good answer. That's an answer that I think people need to hear.
So that was Killer Mike interviewing Bernie Sanders. Many of you have had the opportunity probably to see him speak. If not, please look on YouTube and look up the full interview. It's an hour of a lot of great information. So back here with Terence on We the People. What we're going to do is take some comments from viewers and see if we have any questions or anything for Terence that people would like to address. We have John Spalding as our comment moderator, so I'll bring him on and he will go ahead and direct questions towards you, Terence.
Okay.
John, you can just unmute when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. So first, Terence, the Bad Wolf Time Lady does not believe that you're a millennial. Would you like to set the record straight on that?
Okay, well, there are different ideas as to what the cutoff for millennials is. It's usually set somewhere between 1980 and 1983, depending on the source you look at. I was born in 1981, so I'm right on that borderline. But I definitely identify a lot more with the millennials than I do with Generation X. So.
Yeah, it was tongue in cheek, but that was good. That was good. There was a little bit of discussion in here about what pull yourself up by the bootstraps meant. Cynthia said that it was a military program for people enlisted to leave service for college for a degree and then return as an officer. A couple people noted when you talked about camps, Terence, there weren't a whole lot of questions, but they did appreciate when you were talking about the camps that not a lot of people that are running for office do mention that as part of their speech. So I would encourage you to keep that up. There was a lot of discussion when you guys were talking about healthcare, Terence. There was a lot of reaction when you were talking about healthcare and how it should be a right, and it's not understood why, if the right to life is one of our core liberties, that really should be enforced or enhanced. And people feel there's a lot of misinformation about that, and that's one thing that we really kind of have to keep track of. And I would say the last point, the last kind of general point that came out was just, again, making sure that we're talking to the older generation. I know, John, you talked about this today during the Real Newsroom, just continuing to talk to those folks and letting them know the specifics about his policies and how he really is representing your needs. And a lot of the establishment politicians and people running for that office are not doing it.
So can I address that last point real quick?
Mm-hmm.
I was, a couple months ago, invited to a luncheon for the Democratic Women of Southern Maryland. And it was, largely older people, well, older women, basically. And I was one of the last candidates to speak. It was, several of us were invited and gave our little speeches. And I talked about how my perspective on the world is a little bit different because of when I grew up and when I came of age, because I graduated high school in '99. So right after I graduated high school, we had the tech bubble burst. So we had that little mini recession right after I graduated. And then we had the terrorist attacks on 9/11. And so we had the war on terror that was, still going on today. And then when I came out of college, we had the massive recession. So that has been my post-high school life. And that's just my experience. And then I look forward and I see the trend towards outsourcing labor and the advance of technology that's eventually going to lead to even more automation. Because you can see that in the debate, about the minimum wage, where if we increase the minimum wage, all these jobs are just going to get automated away. And that argument, I mean, it's a good argument, but it doesn't go far enough. It ignores the fact that those jobs are going to get automated away anyway. Like, there are very few jobs that cannot be replaced with computers. So, so the way I ended that whole thing was, you know, my generation is struggling to find employment, you know, that pays enough to get by. The generation after mine is going to struggle to find any employment. They're going to be begging for minimum wage jobs, and they're just not going to be there. And the faces of the people in that room were just completely stunned because they were hearing something that they knew to be true when they heard, but that they had never thought about before.
Yeah. That slide 11, John, you know, that really, that's a great Bernie Sanders and I think Terrence's campaign. It really speaks to, you know, the fact that both of their policies really help every single generation involved in families across the country. And so it's really important, you know, to keep that in mind, that when we're talking about governmental policies, we're talking about things that not only affect you personally, but affect your grandma and your next door neighbor who, you know, you see go out and get the mail, and that's their one day that they get out there, and they're in their 80s. You know, maybe they've never even seen the internet, and they never will. And so whatever they see in the newspaper is what they know. It's important for us as millennials, as older generations too, that we all just keep cross-checking each other, reaching out and really understanding that, hey, maybe we have misinformation, but we live in a technological age and we can access it. So, John, did you have any other comments or questions that anyone wanted to ask before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, thank you. There was one more, and I think it was just more of, Terrence, just kind of giving your opinion from your experience. How are young people supposed, and this is from Bad Wolf Time Lady, how are young people supposed to get small-town government to take them seriously?
That's actually one of the, I hesitate to say easier, but simpler things to solve. Run for office. I mean, I don't remember what the town was, but there's a city where an 18-year-old ran for mayor and won. So, I mean, people who are in that local level of government are really used to not being challenged. Like, they get in and they run unopposed for, like, the rest of their lives, you know, for as long as they want to hold the office. So, as a young person, if you want to make the local levels of government responsive to your needs, run for office. And the more local you get, kind of the easier it is, because you can just you can go out and talk to people and introduce yourself and say, this is why I'm running for office, and this is what I think that we need to do as a city. I just noticed either today or yesterday that DeRay McKesson is running for the mayor of Baltimore, which I think is awesome.
I was very excited to read about that too. It's great to see that people who've been standing strong and all these protesting movements to draw attention to the criminal injustice happening, that they're standing up now and saying, okay, I'll fix this, I will help, I know that I need to, you know, so.
Because that was key of the Occupy movement. I mean, they had all these big ideas, but they didn't want to get involved in the political process. And I think that's something that millennials are trying to fix as we age into the range where we can hold federal office, because you know you can't hold office until you're 25. For House, you have to be 30 to be senator, and you've got to be 35 to run for president. So as we age into that band, I think we're going to pick up where Occupy left off.
Yeah, and with your answer, Terrence, just saying get involved and run for office is key. And then, is it Andrea?
Angela,
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
And then, Angela, what you said about protesting and demanding and asking for what we want, and that goes along with what Sharon said, is remember the reason that we don't already have these things like education, healthcare, services that we really need that should be fundamental to the American experience, or you know, any experience for that matter. The reason we don't have these things is because we don't demand it. We're not organized enough together. We're divided across political lines and everything else. We don't demand it. And
you know
I
what?
think that's critical to what we need to do.
Exactly. Oregon would not be legalized with cannabis right now if it wasn't for Travis and Leah Maurer and Anthony Johnson and a bunch of millennials and that looked at the laws and just couldn't stand it any longer. And like you said, Terrence, they are now of this age, and they've said enough is enough. They're lawyers, they're professionals, they're trying to start businesses, and you know what? They got it on the ballot, they got it legalized because voters wanted it, And the rest of the country is going, whoa, how did that happen? It only happened because some really nice people saw what was happening to everyone else around them and said, enough, I'm going to change this right now, and I'm going to do what I can to change it. And so like people like me are cured of lupus because of people like them. They may never meet me in person, but they saved my life in a way that is going to be profound till I'm an old person and can't remember myself, because they stood up in one moment and chose to serve the public in a way that was very selfless, you know, very, very selfless. And with that selfless message, what we want to do is we want to talk about the differences, or what makes Bernie so important to be president for us. And one of the reasons he's so important is getting big money out of our politics, out of our government. So if you'd like to show slide 12, John, that one talks about, it's a little quote from Bernie, and you know, it says, corporate America is complaining about its high tax burden. Really? Despite record-breaking profits, 1 out of 4 large corporations pays nothing, guys, in federal income taxes. In 1952, corporations paid 32 cents, or 32% of all federal tax income. Today, they pay less than 10%. And you know what? I was looking at a really interesting thing, and what I found when I was researching how much money we're doing a year, we are bringing in $48.9 trillion in trades on the Wall Street market right now every year. And there is so much money flowing through there. A 1% transaction tax to help some of our government programs that we need would bring in $489 billion to work with. I mean, when we talk about needing to get money out of politics, we're talking about why we don't have programs working. You know, it's because the money has been filtered to someone else, and it's not the people that need it.
Well, it's actually it's a two-step problem. So that there's the money in politics, where you know these big companies will give massive campaign contributions or set up super PACs. But then after that, they will actually write the legislation that they want to see passed, and they'll give it to a representative and say, hey, introduce this legislation. And that, to me, is craziness.
That's totally crazy. That's the kind of thing that if you got into office would be very different. So what, you know, if you were in office, who would you be listening to, I guess, because money wouldn't be buying your vote?
I'm kind of unique in that I listen to logic. Like, I have positions on basically every issue that I'm aware of, and those positions are based on research and logic. So if somebody wants to change my position on an issue, they have to provide a better argument than I came up with to take that position in the first place. And that's a pretty high bar, but it happens. Like,
yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way. Yeah, a lot of people feel that way. I think when it comes to a belief system or a belief that they hold, or some way that they look at a policy, you know, until they see concrete evidence that would change their perspective, it's very hard for them to see that it's a great solution. You know, but we're talking about policies that, you know, when we talk about our childhood, that we were raised to see everyone as equal. Well, we see that now, and we want to know why it's not happening in the books. And we can see that if someone has more money and their law manages to trump a whole group of people out of any help from our government or from each other, from our taxes that we're putting in, you know, then we see the whole breakdown in the system, and that's where people like you come in, running for office. And when that question was, how can millennials get involved, this is one of those ways, contacting the new progressives that'll be in the Capitol, being in constant communication with your state legislators and making sure that they know what the needs are of the community there, because nationally it's probably happening, you know, and if they hear that it's happening in a few states, there's a lot more movement or more energy behind it to be able to pass progressive, helpful laws for people.
Okay, so let me add something to that, because I actually have a friend who used to be a congressional staffer, and so she tells these horror stories about her time working for Congress, about how she would get all these phone calls, and then they didn't even keep track of, you know, who was calling on what issues and what they had to say. So if you find that your representative or your senator is not being responsive to your demands, find somebody who will be, because even though they don't represent you, they can still bring your arguments and your needs to the floor of the House. I have friends. I mean, I'm a very internet-based person. That's just kind of how I am. And so I have friends all over the country, all over the world. And so I interact with them on a daily basis. So if somebody from Florida, sent me an email or a Facebook message or whatever and said, hey, I think this is a problem that needs to be addressed, but my representative isn't listening to me, I would have no problem going to the floor of the House and saying this is a problem.
That's the kind of community-driven response we need from candidates, from our congressmen. We need action. So slide 13, John, is just another quote from Bernie where he says, Wall Street's recklessness, greed, and illegal behavior have brought this country to its knees. And he demands that Wall Street start paying its fair share, just like the rest of us are demanding it. So I want to show slide 14 so that Terence could take a moment to talk from his perspective about the proposed progressive tax brackets, because there's a lot of people that will hear from people who are very fearful of what we're talking about, and they say mythical things like he's going to tax people 90%, and we want to get to the truth so that people can calm down so we can move forward with solutions. So would you like to talk about that and let us know what it's like for from your perspective?
Oh, absolutely. And there's something I would like to talk about after I talk about these tax brackets too, and that's the payroll taxes, because that's something that is used kind of as an attack line on a regular basis by the Clinton camp. So as far as the income taxes, I mean, if you make up to $250,000 a year, your taxes don't change. And that's really high up there. Like, members of Congress get paid a ridiculous amount, and $250,000 is even more than they get paid. So that, for the vast majority of Americans, they're going to see no changes. And then, because we have a marginal tax rate, we have marginal tax rates. So even if you're making $10 million a year, which puts you in that very top 52% tax bracket, you're not paying 52% on the whole thing. You're paying 52% on the amount over $10 million. So if you make $20 million a year, you're only paying 52% on that last $10 million. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't get. I mean, I understand that it's not necessarily intuitive. I mean, they see their tax bracket and a number, and they think that that's the rate that they're paying on all their income. And it's just not the case. But in addition to that, the tax that would go up on everybody is the payroll taxes. That's the tax that pays for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And one accusation that gets thrown out all the time is that it's going to be an 8% tax increase. Well, that's not exactly true. It's a 2% tax increase on the employees and a 6% tax increase on the employers. And people will argue that, well, the employers are just going to pass that tax increase on to the employees, but it ignores the fact that the employer is no longer paying the employer portion of the insurance premiums. I saw an article a while back that said, combined, the employer plus employee part of the premium, average family health insurance premiums is $16,000 a year. So, I mean, in the vast majority of cases, the employer is saving money. So the argument that they're somehow going to cut your pay because they're saving money does not make sense.
Right. These are the kinds of myths that you need to break down. So thank you for explaining that to people and explaining what they're being taxed on too. Because I think that a lot of people just don't know, and we need that knowledge out. The whole education thing, right?
Okay,
it's amazing when you have educated voters.
Because one of the things that he talks about is raising the cap on Social Security taxes. So currently, somebody who makes $180,000 a year pays a lower tax rate than someone who makes $100,000 a year because of the cap on income that Social Security taxes come out of. So I think that cap is somewhere around $118,000. So you only pay it on the income up to $118,000. So when you make more than that, up until the next tax bracket, you are actually paying a lower tax rate. Like, your tax rate actually goes down for the money between $118,000 and whenever the next tax bracket is, which might be $250,000.
Yeah. We have, I want to give a few minutes for our viewers to write in any questions or comments they have regarding this topic. And what we'll do is we'll have John, play video 2, please. It's corporations will pay their fair share. This is Bernie Sanders talking about exactly this topic. And And what we'll do is when we come back, we'll have those questions and we'll discuss a little bit more in depth about this before we move on to talking about Hillary Clinton and her private donors.
It seems to me that I have been criticized a lot. I've been criticized a lot because people say, well, you know, Bernie's ideas are really good. We like the idea of creating jobs is good. But, you know, how is he going to pay for it? You know, these are expensive propositions, and how is he going to pay for it? So I want to, just to give you an example of what a rigged economy is about. I mentioned the Walton family, the wealthiest family in the world, being very appreciative that you are supporting them. They're very happy about that. And they asked me to send you their thanks. I mean, they're only worth 60 or 70 billion dollars, and they do appreciate you paying taxes to help them subsidize their workers. But here's how we're going to pay for that. This is how we're going to pay to put 13 million Americans to work rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. Today in America, we are losing $100 billion every single year because large corporations are stashing their profits in the Cayman Islands and other tax havens. In other words, they make billions, they don't pay taxes in America. You pay taxes in America. My guess is that most of you are not stashing your bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Is that a fair assumption? Okay. And here's the reality of what goes on. Reality. The total federal income taxes paid by General Electric, one of our large corporations, Boeing, very large, and Verizon since 2008, all those three corporations add up to less than zero. Three major profitable corporations not only pay nothing in federal income tax, they actually got a rebate from the IRS. These three corporations received a combined tax rebate from the IRS of more than $4.1 billion from 2008 to 2013, even though they made a combined profit of more than $102 billion. Three major corporations made over $100 billion in profit, paid nothing in taxes, and in fact got a rebate from the IRS. That's how we are going to pay to rebuild our infrastructure, put millions of people to work. These guys are going to start paying their fair share of taxes.
I found myself being a little angry when he was saying that, and I've heard that video a few times. It's just very frustrating to just literally watch a group of people that are just taking billions of dollars away from the common good like they are. So what we're going to do is see if John Spalding, if you have any questions or comments, would you like to jump in and talk with Terence about what we were talking about and broadly, if anyone had anything to say.
Yeah, there were a couple reactions. There's people, first of all, were getting distracted by the upcoming debate and by ousting Scott Walker from office for some reason. It was causing a lot of fervor out there on the chat.
There's a lot of reasons for that.
The designer web says most of us do not make more than $250,000, so there was that comment in there. This is a question from KF, and so me not being a tax or a money person, you might be able to answer this. What is the marginal effective tax rate at 52%?
So it would really depend on how much you make. So the total effective tax rate at 12 million is going to be different from the total effective tax rate at 20 million because a different amount of your income is being taxed at that higher rate. So I mean, if I had a calculator and some pen and paper, and all the tax rates in front of me, I could figure out the total effective rate for any given income. But off the top of my head, I mean, it really depends on what your income is, what the total effective rate would be.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so I would say a lot of the other comments really are getting ramped up for the debate tonight. There was one comment, though, Terrence. It was from Bad Wolf, and it was, "I like this dude."
I appreciate that.
Well, Terrence, what are you looking forward to seeing in the debate since people are talking about it?
I don't know. I mean, it's going to be weird not having Martin O'Malley up there. So it's just going to be Bernie and Hillary. And see, in previous debates, Martin O'Malley was taking the position of calling out lies when Bernie Sanders is too much of a gentleman to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll see what Bernie reacts to in terms of misinformation that is put out there, because I have no illusions that is not going to be a problem.
His stance has definitely been a lot stronger in the last week. When you notice the more that he's being attacked, the more that he is standing up strongly and advocating for his policies and staying on a very positive message, yet being very strong, saying there is a pronounced difference between us, and I'm not going to hide away from it. Like, you can make your own decision based on who you want to vote for.
Very early on in the campaign, and he was asked about negative advertising. And he said that he had never run a negative ad in his life, but he said that he hoped he wouldn't have to. So I think, like, if he keeps being lied about and he keeps being attacked like he's been attacked, I think Hillary had better watch out, because she could push him too far, and there is a lot of ammunition out there that could be used against her.
Mm-hmm. And he's been pretty graceful not using it, letting other people go ahead and share it nationwide and online, internationally, but yeah, he's taking the high road most of the time.
The idea to me, I hear people talk about, oh, the Republicans are attacking Hillary so much, they want Bernie to win, and that's why they're attacking Hillary. If Republicans really wanted Bernie Sanders to win this primary, they would be using very different attacks. They are not looking. They're not looking to make her lose this election. All they're doing is they're riling up their base, because their base hates Hillary Clinton, and they love seeing her attacked. If they really wanted to weaken her in this primary, they would be using very different attack lines.
They would be using all the concrete evidence we have.
They would not be attacking her on Benghazi. They would be attacking her on her comments on the 1994 crime bill, her comments fighting for gutting the social safety net, or getting rid of aid to families with dependent children, and replacing it with temporary aid to needy families. All of these things that just infuriate the Democratic base. That is what they would be hitting her with, and they're not, because they're not interested in running against Bernie Sanders, no matter what the Hillary camp says.
Well, John, if you'd like to show slide 15, we're actually going to kind of segue into talking about this topic. What we're going to say about Hillary Clinton is just talking about who she takes donations from, who she's getting speaking fees from, but we're not talking about her character. We're not going to do anything beyond saying when we find it obvious that she said one thing at one point and changed her mind, or if we're really trying to make sure that there are times for us to be on fire about things that infuriate us, but this is a moment for us to really showcase why Bernie is such an outstanding candidate for us, and also why, Terrence, you would be a great choice as well, because you guys see that we need to get big money out of politics, and for some reason she's still choosing to pad her pockets. So if you look at slide 15, there's a couple. I've included some Instagrams from some people that I've found online just to give some shout outs to Bernie supporters. But basically what we're looking at is Hillary has, she's received a lot of money from a lot of different parts of industry that are lobbying all the time, and they have a lot of clout in our Congress. So what I wanted to show that with that slide 15 was I just wanted you to talk about what about your fundraising efforts, if you wanted to mention that really quickly, and also what your stance is going to be. Are you going to allow Super PAC, or are you as well taking a strong stance against mysterious money?
So I am strongly opposed to super PACs. I am not, however, opposed to PACs. So, for example, if Friends of the Earth decided they wanted to give me money, I would take that money. I would be totally fine with that. Just like the National Nurses United is it's a PAC. It's a regular PAC that is from this nurses union, and because there's a difference. Because PACs have disclosure rules that super PACs do not. As far as my own fundraising, that's something that I'm not necessarily very good at. I am big enough to admit my strengths and my weaknesses, and asking people for money is a weakness of mine. I've had a number of donations, but they've all been very small. I think I might have had a $100 donation, but it's primarily been $50 and less. And my campaign is running primarily on seed money that I put in myself, which was not very much, admittedly. I mean, I'm running against some people who were able to put in, $40,000, $80,000 of their own money, and I just do not have that kind of money.
Well, I thank you for being authentic about it and transparent, because that's something that a lot of voters are looking for, especially when they're looking at Bernie Sanders and they're looking at progressives in their area. So thanks for clarifying that. And what we'll do now is we'll just call Bernie supporters out. Hey, guys, if you're in Maryland and if you're in the surrounding areas, please get in contact with Terence and help him out. Spread the message of Bernie and Terence's campaigns around, so that those voters who are actually aligned with all of these policies will be able to hear that there's a candidate that's actually working for them, both candidates. So slide 16, if we want to just cover that for just a second. Most people have seen this meme, where it lists Hillary Clinton's big donors. Some of the things that have come out recently is the speaking fees that she has gotten for speaking at colleges. I know today they were talking about, the speaking fees from Goldman Sachs and it being $675,000, and Anderson Cooper addressed that last night in the town hall. But what I wanted to address with this is I wanted to find out your take as a former college student. You see a politician taking large amounts from your college. In our slide we have some from Simmons College, the University of Connecticut, even the University of California. I was just wondering, what do you think? How does it feel for a student? There's a lot of people that will not be in college in the age time that we were, and you have $60,000 worth of debt, and you go to a school to hear someone speak, and they're getting $100,000. How's that feel?
That's just crazy to me, because these are schools that are increasing their tuition like every year. Tuition has doubled in the past, 10 years or so, maybe even less than that. So the fact that tuition is going up so high, and that $100,000 or whatever she's getting paid at these schools, that's coming out of students' tuition money. And these are schools that at the same time are replacing full-time faculty with adjunct part-time teachers that they're paying terribly. When I was in school, I was actually friends with one of our adjunct professors who was teaching a couple of classes. And the amount she was getting paid was just, it's what you would expect. If you know the situation with our public schools, it's what you would expect a public school teacher to pay.
It's frustrating. It's very frustrating. Those teachers deserve better, and the students deserve better as a result. So we had a question of how we can contribute to you. So would you like to is it on your website?
Yes, if you go to straightforcongress.com, there is a link to my Act Blue site, and there's also a number of issue pages. I'm actually proud of my website, because rather than paying several $1,000s to a fancy developer to build it for me, I actually took a template. There's a service where you can go in, but all the content is mine. So I kind of built it myself, and I'm proud of that. And I included a number of issues. I tried not go overboard, because wall of text. But yeah, look at where I stand on the issues, and if there's something that you think that I should address that I haven't addressed, there's also a way to get in contact with me, so I can see if that's something that would be worth adding to the page.
Well, John, would you like to show slide 19 for a second, and that way people can see the different ways they can get in contact with Terence. We'll show this again at the end so people know how to reach him on Twitter or Facebook, and what his website address is, which is Strait for Congress. And Strait is spelled S-T-R-A-I-T. So the last two slides, we're just going to kind of wrap up what's going on in Maryland, because slide 17 gives us some dates that Maryland voters can refer to. Maryland is a closed primary, correct, Terence? Yes. Okay, so they do need to be registered as a Democrat. And we put on the slide there, just so everybody knows, April 5th is the deadline. and your primary will be April 26th. So if you want to register, you can register online. They have the ability on their voter website. You can also drop by your voter registration application at any of their election offices there in Maryland. So we didn't have time to talk about the caucus and stuff, the coin flips and stuff with Hillary Clinton, but I wanted to make sure that if people want to talk with Terence again, we're definitely going to have him back on, and we'll get his take on lots of those kinds of issues again. The last slide is slide 18, and it's just for a general website push to let people know that if you're not in Maryland and you want to know what your voter registration requirements are and the deadlines for your state, you can go to a website called voteforbernie.org, and it'll give you all the info you need, and you can share it with your grandparents and your parents, your children, and let people know what they need to do so that they're not surprised and blindsided when the election rolls around. So let's see. Hey, John Spalding, do we have any other comments or any questions left for Terence before we wrap up today?
Thanks, Ange. Not many questions. There are some kudos coming in right now. Ski Vermont said, thank you for doing the interview. DMY91 said, I live in Maryland, but not in the right district. They wish they could vote for you. Sharon, I wanted to know if you were running for Congress, and so we all confirmed that, yes, you were, in fact, running for Congress, and we put your website in the chat. Holly says, thanks. Dave says, we need more people like you and Bernie to run. And I would say that's a good wrap for the comments.
Well, just in response to that last one, there's a Google document that's out there that has a list of Bernie-crats that are running for office across the country, and it's a fairly large list, and it's got people from most of the states. And I don't have that address on me, but that's something that I can definitely send to you to put out.
That'd be wonderful. We'll be sure to tweet it out if we haven't had a chance to share something like that, because we're always looking to find, this list is evolving as more people stand up like you and say, you know what, enough, I'm going to do something about it if no one else will. And we definitely want to keep bringing people on our show, We the People, and let them speak just like you so they can say what they're going to do, because it's profoundly different than anything we've heard from other politicians. So.
Yeah. There is one thing that I would like to say before we close out, because I think the debate's starting or is about to start. And one thing that I've been asked a number of times is how I see myself as different from Bernie, because it's very easy to just kind of hitch your wagon to somebody who's running up the ticket, but you need to have kind of your own vision as well. So what I've said, that's my primary difference from Bernie Sanders, is Bernie sees where we need to be as a country right now, and he's fighting to get us to where we need to be right now. I take a little bit of a longer view, and I say, okay, well, once we get to where we need to be now, where do we go into the future? And so that's what I think the big difference between the two of us is.
I think that's wonderful, though, because that's something that millennial view is very broad. We all see the future vision. We see the future because we are in our 20s, 30s, and we're looking to the future. And that's a part of our core as we develop our families. Having children and having spouses and creating little communities, and becoming our own people. Joining up and volunteering in communities. That's something people can do. You don't have to do stuff that has to do with the Bernie campaign to make a huge difference. You can join up with Women for Bernie. You can join up with Bernie 2016 TV. A lot of people are doing both because the technological advance is so incredible. You can phone bank for 2 hours for Bernie that day for the campaign, and then you can go and help out and do a broadcast with us. So I hope people will look at the show and understand that this is an opportunity for you, if you feel the call, to run for office. There's people like Terence out there that have felt it, and they're standing up. And Bernie Sanders obviously felt it from a very young age, and he has been fighting very hard to bring that view to light for a long time, a view that many of us hold in our hearts. And just like you said many times, it's just ridiculous to think that healthcare is not a right. It's ridiculous to think that people don't deserve the right to pursue life and happiness here. So
it's ridiculous to think that anybody deserves to live on the streets. And that's something that I think I go a little bit further than other people. It's very popular to say that we shouldn't have veterans living on the streets and being homeless. I don't think we should have anybody on the streets homeless, especially, after the blizzard that we had very recently. We got 2.5 feet of snow. which was crazy. It was more snow in a weekend than we generally get in a whole winter. But the idea that anybody, no matter what their life decisions, no matter what they do or don't do, the idea that anybody deserves to be living out in that is just offensive to me.
And it's something that politicians should be stopping. It shouldn't be a problem.
And it's something we can stop. I mean, we have like 18 million vacant houses in this country. Just being, like, sitting vacant, owned by banks. And we have, you know, like a fifth of that in terms of homeless people. We could give every homeless person a house.
Yeah. And still have some empty ones left over for,
A lot of them
for new families. That's right. So we're going to be switching over soon because the debate has started, or it is starting. And what we'll do is we'll close out with a little clip of Bernie when he was with Vampire Weekend and a few other musicians, and a huge rally of supporters of where they sang one of our favorite childhood songs that I think is kind of fitting, considering we've been talking about generations today. So Terence, I want to say thank you so much for coming today on the show and for talking with us. And also to John and John Spalding as well for comment moderating. It was nice to meet you finally. So we hope everyone has a wonderful night and enjoys the debate. Send your debate with Bernie hashtags out and support his tweets and the things that he's doing so that more people can hear what's going on in places like Maryland and other states so that we can get Terence and Bernie elected. Have a great night.
Thank you.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me.
Huge